Greetings and well met. Grinding Gear Game Studio has welcomed us with its early access game and it has proven to be a massive success. I was there with all the other content creators awaiting servers to go live, and after 3 long funny hours of anticipation, we finally got to see the fantasy world of Rayclast. Welcome to Path of Exile 2 Early Access Review. You start the journey by choosing a class at the Gallows, varying from 6 available classes with the target of 12 as the full release of the game. There is currently no character creation menu, same as PoE 1. You simply choose a class and then you're ready to traverse the world. In the ARPG genre, I wouldn't classify that as a flaw, since most of the time your camera is rather far away from the character's face, with the game focusing on action rather than immersive dialogues. Once we've escaped the inevitable death at the Gallows, the real journey begins. Since this is my first review on the channel, I plan to organize all my future reviews into particular sections such as stability/performance, sound, gameplay, graphics, story, and many more depending on the game and the genre. Also, I'd be grateful for any constructive feedback in the comments below. Let's start with the cherry on top, gameplay/mechanics. First, I want to address that playing as a monk in terms of overall gameplay is absolutely phenomenal. It is quite insane once you reach a certain level threshold, but more of that later. I'll be showing you guys a perspective of this mystical warrior, as it is the only class I currently possess. I've managed to grasp some form of understanding of the other classes in their early hours just to get a comparison and a full overview. The pace at the beginning is rather calm, with the emphasis on positioning, caution and charge buildup. When I first saw the smash ability with full charges, I was filled with awe. While it wreaks absolute havoc on standard mobs, this isn't the case for Act 1 bosses, unfortunately. A lot of the encounters I was mashing one button with not a lot of options to choose from. As a result, the boss fights were noticeably longer, punishing and clunky. But that doesn't mean the bosses were uninteresting, quite the opposite actually. I fondly remember majority of the encounters. I believe that GGG should provide some tools for the players to be adequately prepared for Act 1 bosses specifically, if the game is to appeal to the casual player base. And I say this by having 150 hours in Last Epoch and 200 hours in Lost Ark. I've been around a while to know what's going on in the ARPG section. Another topic I want to touch is the exploration. The maps are quite enormous, yet the game slightly discourages you to explore the entire map, as there is no possibility to teleport to the checkpoints, which I think has to be added into the final release. And the reason you should explore the entire map is the extra rewards coming from it. For the game doesn't offer a lot of side quests that could provide advantage to your character. And there are some encounters that give you 2 additional perk points in the giant talent tree, which I think plays a huge role in developing your character in the long-term scenario. Add a little bit of 2 here, add a little bit of 2 there, and over the course of the whole campaign, we're looking at the dozens of points simply by exploring the map to the absolute maximum. Speaking of perks, just as the developer said, do not get intimidated by the large talent tree, as each of the PoE class has access to the same nodes as you do, so naturally, large proportion of those perks are pretty straightforward, such as crit chance, cast speed, traits like strength, dexterity, and so on. On top of that, a skill from a different class can be unlocked if you meet its trait requirement. If you see a spell that you want on your melee class, it can be learned. It's also worth noting that once you get a particular set of skills, you don't get overwhelmed with the new ones. You have a lot of time to get to know how your current skills work before unlocking the next row. There's even an instructional video that perfectly describes targeted ability in a matter of seconds. Now, the thing I didn't like the most about the skills is the forced meta of some particular skills and spells. And what I mean by that is that cursed bell on my monk. I didn't like the idea of spawning a large piece of metal on my mystic warrior, but to progress further in the game and to deal some considerable amount of damage, I was forced to use it for quite impactful amount of time. In boss fights, it was rather essential. On the screen you can see the comparison between the same boss, with only difference being the level of my character. Although I don't like the bell, it provides me such a power spike that I simply can't build myself without it. You may ask why you fight the same boss on higher level. Well, it turns out that Early Access has 3 chapters ready, with 3 more on their way. So to fill the gap before the end game, they've decided to release 3 temporary chapters that are just the same as the ones you've just cleared. It is of course something they mentioned on the PoE 2 panel, and it's an early access, so it's nothing to be picky about. Now, if I were to describe among difficulty in 4 words, it would be high risk, high reward, as the character is rather squishy but deals tons of damage if built accordingly. I certainly wasn't when it came to the caravan section. If you plan to run past the mobs just to get to your corpse, I have to tell you it's a terrible idea. I gave out a lot of quarters, if you know what I mean. After death, the enemies respawn. Also, roll doesn't phase through enemies, and in the worst case scenario you may get body blocked, which mostly results in inevitable death. It's highly debatable for me whether it's a good mechanic. There are pros and cons to this procedure, so I leave the final thoughts to you with this one. In terms of itemization, I've encountered really poor loot drop, and it is not limited to the class you play. There's an item I've only replaced after 30 levels, which is quite a long period. I've tried experimenting with the orbs upgrading your armor and weapons, which somehow compensates the lack of frequency of the drops. As a result, once you get an item suitable for your class, it really feels meaningful and fulfilling. Some may complain about this mechanic, and some people love it. Again, it is highly debatable. Before I move to the next section, I just quickly want to talk about the endgame content, since I've only scratched a small surface of what it has to offer. The Trials of Sekima and the Trial of Chaos, for example. The honor system is based on the damage you take from the various sources during that encounter. That being said, a melee class is punished more than a range class would be in the same situation. As for the Trial of Chaos, I considered it way too hard for what it had to offer, but that may be also caused by the squishiness of my monk. And moving on, we have microtransactions and store. The store currently offers you nothing but convenience in form of stash tabs and character slots, with the vast majority of it being awesome looking armor sets and pets and things alike. It's worth noting that the armor sets are purely for display and don't possess any stats boosting your gameplay. Therefore, Path of Exile 2 is not a pay-to-win game. This alone captures a lot of people's attention. I would show you each and every set, but I don't want the video to be too long. And I also want to cover the most significant things. Now let's move to the next category, graphics. There's not much to criticize in terms of visuals of the game. I only wish they showed more of the beautiful world of Rayclass in form of small cutscenes, camera transitions and things like that. The textures are absolutely crisp. Some of them didn't load properly, which resulted in the game crashing, but more of that in the next category. I still want to say a few words about the aesthetics. The animations have left a huge impression on me. When I first saw the core abilities in action, I suddenly felt an influx of joy, as if I were a happy child playing with his favorite toy. The theme changes regularly. In one moment you're carving your way out in a sunny forest, and in a second you delve into the dark, mysterious catacombs, providing you with diverse experience. In terms of armor fashion, let's just say it's okay, at least for a monk. I've worn some rags that were soon replaced by some other rags. I have to admit I'm not fully content with the way my armor looks like. The major part in this outcome plays the previous statement about the loot. Since there is not a lot of it, you pretty much have to stay with the standard robes for quite a bit of time. But there's a remedy for that in the microtransaction sections, which we've discussed previously. Now, I do have to expand on the game crashing aspect, so let's get to the category being stability/performance. Up to level 22, the game crashed to desktop about 5 times, and I don't mean the servers, it was the error involving the textures for some reason, and it's worth noting that I did download the drivers, which was recommended by the developers on Twitter. Normally I let it slide, but these crashes were happening during major boss fights too. Luckily, it only happened on the first day, so most of these issues are probably fixed by now. Same can be said for the FPS drops. The game is optimized rather well. I ran everything on max settings with 2K resolution on my RTX 470. As for the servers, I may have stumbled upon a few lags here and there, but nothing major that could dissuade me from playing the game. With so many copies sold, it's truly worth noting that the servers took the heavy load exceptionally well. Sound/music. With sound effects, I've got nothing relevant to mention other than the sounds being a great addition for the already awesome visuals of the skills. As for the soundtrack, it complements the game as a whole. Boss fight music from Act 1, the soothing caravan theme, it's something that plays in my head even when I go to sleep. Shout out to Mr. Kamil Ormanianowski, which by the way shares the same nationality with me. I couldn't expect less from a Polish music composer. Great job, buddy. The story. Some of my takes here may end up controversial, but I have to lay the truth on the table. It's also a hard topic considering the review shouldn't contain spoilers. So, the story is present, it's there for the sake of the game, but it's not something that is compelling and meaningful, at least for me. For a story to be good in a video game, you need to make it relatable, simple, yet complex on a particular level. And also the characters need to be distinct, meaningful. Take a good example like Arthas Menethil in Warcraft, a tragic character people absolutely cherished. Taking another successful character is Tyrael in Diablo series, Lilith in Inarius, and in PoE 2, let's just say the Hidden One is the only character I remember well and vividly. I haven't played much of the first PoE, but I once heard Asmongold saying that PoE 1, if you look at the lore, you basically had to slay gods. In PoE 2, most of the story I got is from the cinematic, so I do have some vague understanding on what the hell is going on, but it's not a compelling story. I have to give this to Diablo 3 and 4, with the cinematics being a lot more frequent and more interesting. Blizzard had more distinct characters, with the story a lot easier to understand and adore. Summary/score. Of all the ARPGs I've played so far, it's safe to say that PoE 2 has the biggest potential to become an awesome game, supported for many years by their passionate developers. And as to the final score of the game, you must be truly wronged by the gaming media if you thought I'd give a final score to an early access game. It's not a finished product, there is still lots of content to come. I shall be revisiting the world of Rayclast on its full release as a Templar, and only then shall I give a final score. Meanwhile, just enjoy the game as I did, but if you really want some form of reference point, then I can say that this game plays better than Diablo 4, better than Last Epoch, quite on par with Lost Ark, with the difference of PoE 2 not being a pay-to-win game. If you're a fan of ARPGs, Path of Exile 2 is the game you should absolutely try at your earliest convenience. Blessings upon you, friends. Farewell.